Beneath the silence of the polar night, where the horizon bleeds into a canvas of endless white, lies a world few have ever touched. Shattered cliffs of ice rise like forgotten monuments, guarding the mysteries of an ocean buried in time. These frozen seas whisper of civilizations erased, of creatures that roam before memory, and of secrets that the earth itself has tried to conceal beneath its glacial veil. This is not just a story of ice. It is a story of endurance, of loss, and of the hidden truth beneath the surface of a vanishing world. Before we embark on this journey, remember to like, share, and subscribe, so that the voices of forgotten worlds continue to echo, reaching those who still dare to listen. At the edge of the polar world, where the ocean collides with eternity, rise walls of ice so vast they seem to scrape the heavens. They tower like the remnants of a forgotten kingdom, jagged and luminous, shimmering with hues of blue so deep they could swallow the sky itself. To approach these cliffs is to feel small, as though standing before a cathedral not built by human hands, but by the slow, relentless breathing of the earth. The winds howl here, weaving through the cracks and crevices of the ice, their voice both mournful and commanding, as if the cliffs themselves are speaking in a language older than time. They are not silent. They groan, they fracture, they roar with the violence of collapsing towers. When a section of cliff breaks away and falls into the sea, the sound is deafening. The very air trembles. The ocean rises in protest, and echoes linger across the horizon. Each collapse is not just an ending, but a revelation, exposing deeper layers of frozen history hidden within. Bands of ancient ice are revealed like the rings of a tree, each one a chapter in a book written by centuries of storm, snowfall, and silence. Sailors once feared these places. Early expeditions spoke of icebergs that loomed like watchmen, their crystalline forms carved into faces, spires, and twisted silhouettes. They gave the cliffs names like the Gates of Silence or the Frozen Fortress. Some whispered that these walls were not natural at all, but ruins of something left behind, monuments of a world that existed before the seas froze. Superstition clung to the sailors' stories, but even now, standing before these cliffs, it is hard not to wonder. For the ice does not feel lifeless. It watches. It waits. And in the presence of such immensity, humans cannot help but feel like trespassers. Modern explorers, armed with instruments and reason, describe the cliffs in precise terms: density, thickness, age, rate of retreat. Yet even they falter when trying to capture the atmosphere of the place. Their voices soften. Their eyes drift to the horizon. Words become poetry in spite of themselves, for science, though sharp and clear, cannot account for the feeling of standing before a wall of ice that has withstood the rise and fall of civilizations. These cliffs have been here longer than the empires of men, longer than the ink of history, longer even than the human voice itself. The ice has watched us come and go. Step closer, and the details reveal themselves. Fractures spider across the surface, glowing faintly as light refracts through depths unseen. Water trickles from fissures, whispering softly before vanishing into the ocean below. In some places, bubbles of air shimmer in frozen suspension, tiny prisons holding the breath of creatures long extinct. To break open such a bubble is to inhale the atmosphere of another world. And here, in these bubbles, lies one of the ice's greatest secrets: memory. The cliffs remember everything. They are libraries of snow, preserving the rise and fall of climates, the ebb and flow of oceans, the very rhythm of Earth's heartbeat. But memory is heavy, and memory demands to be heard. At night, when the world falls silent and the auroras dance overhead, the cliffs are transformed. Light cascades across their frozen faces in waves of green and violet, igniting the ice into radiant fire. Shadows lengthen, shapes shift, and the cliffs appear alive, guardians carved in crystal, keeping secrets locked beneath their frozen skins. Some explorers claim they have heard voices in the night, faint murmurs carried on the wind, or deep, resonant tones vibrating through the ice itself. Skeptics dismiss this as the creaking of glaciers, the natural symphony of frozen giants under strain. But those who have felt it know better. The cliffs are not simply shifting, they are speaking. And so the journey begins here, at the threshold of the unknown. Before us stand the gates of shattered ice, vast and unyielding, daring us to step closer, to listen, to uncover the stories they guard. What waits beyond them, in the dark seas below, in the ancient layers within, is a truth the world is not yet ready to face. The gates are opening. The deeper one ventures toward these frozen battlements, the more the world begins to distort. The air grows sharper, slicing against exposed skin as though it, too, carries the hostility of the ice. The sea becomes restless, rolling in great swells that strike the cliffs like battering rams, but the ice absorbs each blow with a stoic patience. It has endured storms for centuries, and it will endure them for centuries more, unless something from within begins to break it apart. For there is movement beneath the cliffs. The surface, rigid and eternal, hides a labyrinth of shifting tunnels, hollow chambers, and rivers of meltwater that rush unseen in the darkness. Some explorers have lowered instruments into these cracks, listening as microphones capture groans, rumbles, and pulses that resemble the beating of a heart. Others describe hearing rhythms that sound uncannily like voices, distant and layered, as though the ice is not empty but inhabited. What dwells within, no one can say with certainty, but those who have stood too close often carry the sound with them for years, a whisper lodged in memory, returning in dreams. These cliffs are not walls alone. They are gates, and every gate suggests an entrance. On rare days, when the tide pulls back and the sun hangs low, caves are revealed at the base of the cliffs, mouths of ice yawning open, their interiors glittering with sapphire light. To step into one is to step into another realm, a sanctuary both terrifying and exquisite. The walls glow as sunlight filters through frozen ceilings, bending into rays that scatter like shattered glass. Every droplet that falls resounds like a bell, echoing down corridors where no man has walked before. Yet the beauty carries with it a sense of trespass. These places feel sacred, as though they were never meant to be seen, as though the very act of entering is a violation of ancient silence. Legends linger around these hidden spaces. The Inuit speak of spirits dwelling in the ice, guardians who punish those who enter uninvited. Sailors once claimed to see figures standing within the caves, tall silhouettes that vanished as they drew nearer. Modern accounts may dismiss these tales as mirages, tricks of light against ice, but such explanations fail to account for the unease that grips even the most rational minds. For within those chambers, silence itself feels alive, watching, listening, waiting. The cliffs hold more than whispers. They hold remains. Fragments of wood, carried by currents from lands unknown, have been found locked within the ice. Shards of ships long lost to the sea. Some are splintered, others eerily intact, preserved as though frozen only yesterday. Each discovery becomes a tombstone, a reminder of those who dared approach the gates and never returned. One expedition in the 19th century vanished without trace, save for a single plank of wood embedded in a cliff, its surface scarred with marks that no storm could explain. Were they carved by desperate hands? Or by something else, something that claimed them? The ice does not answer. It only holds its secrets close. Scientists are turned again and again, driven by curiosity and by the allure of the unknown. They measure, they drill, they record, and yet every answer they find only births more questions. Instruments detect heat pockets deep within the cliffs, anomalies where warmth defies the laws of surrounding cold. Some suggest geothermal activity. Others whisper of something biological, something alive. Cameras lowered into fissures capture fleeting images, shadows darting past the lens, shapes indistinct yet undeniable. Skeptics argue these are distortions, tricks of pressure and light, but those who have seen them cannot forget. For in the stillness of the frozen gates, something stirs. And so the cliffs loom, guardians of silence, keepers of memory, thresholds into the unknown. They are magnificent, yet menacing, beautiful, yet forbidding. To cross their boundary is to step into a story that does not want to be told. The ice resists intrusion. It fractures, it shifts, it warns with thunderous cracks that echo across the endless horizon. Yet still, we are drawn in, because beyond these gates lies a sea buried in shadow, a place where history sleeps and the future trembles. And the gates, though unyielding, cannot hold forever. The cliffs rise higher, the deeper one sails into their shadow. Here, the sun vanishes behind frozen towers, and the sea grows dark, reflecting only fractured shards of sky. It is a place of silence, but not peace. The silence here is heavy, pressing against the chest, as though the very air resists intrusion. Every wave slaps the hull like a warning. Every gust of wind carries the hiss of voices that are not there. Yet the most unnerving moments come when everything stops. The water calms. The air stills. The cliffs loom in complete quiet, as if holding their breath. It is then, explorers say, that the weight of the place sinks deepest. The sensation that you are being watched, not by eyes, but by the very bones of the earth. The ice does not simply surround you. It studies you. Stories of these silences have haunted the journals of polar explorers for centuries. One captain described it as standing inside the pause between heartbeats. Another wrote that his men refused to row, claiming they heard footsteps crunching across ice that lay hundreds of feet above them. None could explain it, and none dared remain long enough to search for the source. For every silence was followed by thunder. Somewhere, a crack would erupt, splitting through the cliffs like a rifle shot, followed by a roar as ancient walls collapsed into the sea. The silence always ended in violence. But what if the silence itself was not emptiness? What if it was listening? Modern equipment confirms that the cliffs hum with low frequencies, vibrations deep below human hearing. Scientists record these tones and analyze them as glacial shifts, but some of the patterns repeat, rhythms that echo like songs. Not chaotic, not random, but structured. Some researchers dismiss them as coincidence. Others, quietly, admit unease. For if the ice carries a song, then who, or what, is singing? Deeper fissures reveal more troubling signs. Within the frozen walls lie streaks of dark material, sediments that defy their expected age. Samples drawn from these layers reveal organic traces, carbon signatures, microscopic fragments that belong not to ice, but to something once alive. Creatures, perhaps, that were caught in the freeze, their remains compressed into the cliffs like flies trapped in amber. Some are small, unremarkable, remnants of plankton or ancient algae, but others are larger, far larger. Shadows in the ice that stretch across meters, their shapes impossible to dismiss as natural formations. Photographs capture outlines resembling ribs, vertebrae, a skull-like curve pressed into frozen crystal. The scientific reports describe them carefully, cautiously, refusing to speculate. But those who look upon the images feel an unease that words cannot soften. For if the cliffs are gates, then what lies beyond them may not only be a sea, it may be a graveyard. And graveyards are rarely silent forever. The ice shifts constantly. Each crack is a doorway waiting to open wider. Each collapse releases fragments of the past into the present. Already, melting has exposed remnants of ships lost more than a century ago. Wood, rope, rusted iron. But alongside them, stranger things emerge. Bones too large to belong to any known creature. Twisted remnants that seem almost sculpted, and sounds recorded in the water that no modern species makes. The cliffs are not just walls of frozen water. They are prisons. And the prisoners, long buried, are stirring. To stand at the gates of shattered ice is to feel history pressing outward, demanding release. The cliffs do not crumble by chance. They open, piece by piece, as though what is hidden beneath has grown restless. The gates are not eternal. They are failing. And when they fall completely, the world will not simply gain access to the frozen seas. It will face what the seas have guarded for millennia. As twilight descends and auroras writhe across the heavens, the cliffs glow with spectral fire. Ice fractures echo like distant drums. The gates are alive, and they are opening wider with every passing season. Beyond them lies an ocean that remembers everything, an ocean that waits. And so we leave the threshold, not in safety, but in anticipation. For the cliffs are no longer content to guard their secrets. They are preparing to reveal them. The journey does not end here. It begins. Beneath the shattered gates, where ice walls plunge into blackness, lies a world unlike any other on Earth. The sea here is not an ocean in the way we know it. It is a realm of silence and shadow, a chamber beneath the frozen ceiling of the poles. Light, which dances so vividly across the cliffs above, dies almost immediately upon entering these waters. What remains is darkness, vast and suffocating, where every shape must be felt rather than seen, and every ripple carries the weight of something ancient. Yet this ocean is not lifeless. It remembers. Every current moves like a vein, carrying with it fragments of history, tiny remnants of worlds long erased. Scientists who have probed these depths with machines find chemical fingerprints that defy expectation. Waters rich in salts that belong to older seas, temperatures that spike suddenly in pockets of warmth, places where the laws of cold and pressure bend and refuse explanation. The ocean is not uniform. It is fractured, layered, like a memory half forgotten and half dreamed, replaying itself beneath the ice. The creatures that inhabit this abyss reflect its memory. Some are known to science: pale fish with translucent bodies, drifting plankton glowing faintly like embers. But others, glimpsed only rarely, defy classification. Shapes larger than submarines, shadows that move against the currents, eyes that catch the faint gleam of artificial lights before vanishing into the depths. The few recordings that exist are fragmented, blurred, often dismissed by institutions as anomalies. Yet those who lower their cameras speak differently, of presences they feel but cannot name, of movements too deliberate to be mistaken for chance. In this ocean, silence is never truly silent. Microphones placed beneath the ice capture sounds the human ear was never meant to hear. Some are natural: the crack of shifting glaciers, the groan of currents grinding against the cliffs. But woven among them are tones that linger, rhythmic pulses that seem intentional. They rise and fall like chants, echoing across miles of black water. Some repeat in intervals, others shift in patterns too complex to dismiss. To listen is to feel as though one is hearing the breath of something vast, something hidden. Scientists catalog them under sterile names, unknown hydroacoustic anomalies. But among those who have heard them in person, the names are different. They call them the songs of the deep. And songs imply a singer. Legends exist even here. Stories from ancient sailors who ventured too far north speak of voices carried on the waves, of oceans that spoke back to the men who crossed them. One Norse tale tells of a great being that slumbered beneath the ice, its dreams shaping the tides. When explorers of the modern era first recorded deep ocean vibrations, some drew the same conclusion: that the sea beneath the poles is alive, not merely filled with life, but conscious in some way we cannot yet comprehend. To believe such a thing feels impossible. And yet, the ocean resists dismissal. It holds too many anomalies, too many coincidences that gather into a pattern. Even the currents themselves seem to move with intent. In certain places, The waters circle endlessly, forming gyres that mirror the spiral shapes carved into ancient stones found thousands of miles away. Coincidence, perhaps? Or memory? The ocean repeating symbols long before humans knew how to carve them. What terrifies explorers most is not what they see, but what they do not. Machines lowered into the depths often fail. Their signals scrambled, their recordings cut short as though something interferes. Batteries drain with unnatural speed. Compass needles spin. At times, instruments resurface carrying scratches along their metal casings, marks etched by something with strength and purpose. The ocean beneath the ice is not passive. It resists intrusion, the way a body resists infection. And still, we return. For there is something down here, something waiting. A memory so old that it bends the present toward it, demanding recognition. The cliffs above may serve as the gates, but this ocean is the heart. It beats slowly, rhythmically, and with every pulse, the question deepens. The deeper one descends, the more the ocean transforms into something alien. Pressure builds like an invisible weight, crushing, squeezing, reminding us that this is a world not meant for human presence. Lights cast from submersibles stretch only a few feet before being swallowed whole, as though the water itself refuses illumination. The darkness here is absolute, endless, alive. It clings to every surface, to every thought, until even the explorers within their reinforced vessels begin to feel as though they are drifting through a dream too heavy to wake from. But the dream is not empty. It is filled with movement. Tiny sparks flicker in the void, bioluminescent organisms drifting like stars in a black sky. They pulse in patterns, brief and delicate, as though communicating in a language of light. Follow them long enough, and the patterns seem to form sequences, spirals, and bursts that repeat again and again. Coincidence, perhaps, or instinct. But some sequences echo the rhythms recorded in the low, haunting sounds that tremble through the water. As above, so below. Sound and light entwined, two languages of memory speaking across the abyss. Then there are the shadows. Submersibles capture fleeting glimpses of them, immense forms sliding just beyond the edge of visibility, shapes larger than whales, moving with a grace too deliberate to be mistaken for drifting ice. Cameras shake, images blur, and the ocean swallows its secrets once more. But always, the sensation lingers that something vast has passed by, close enough to touch, yet unwilling to be fully seen. The scientists speak cautiously, as they must. They measure the anomalies, they chart the currents, they record the sounds. But beneath their data lies unspoken fear. Pressure readings sometimes shift inexplicably, as though the water itself is flexing against the vessel. In one instance, an entire submersible was jolted sideways by a force no one could explain. No quake, no current, no collapse. When it resurfaced, its metal hull bore deep grooves, parallel scars etched as though by claws. Officially, the event was recorded as equipment damage due to ice, but those who were inside tell another story. They say they felt something moving outside, circling, watching, testing the strength of the cage that kept them safe. For in this ocean, it is impossible to forget that we are intruders. Even without instruments, the body senses it. A pressure behind the ears, a tightness in the lungs, a feeling not of drowning but of being smothered by memory itself. The water carries with it traces of ages long past, particles of ancient forests, ash from volcanic fires, whispers of extinct life suspended like dust in a forgotten library. Every drop is older than our civilizations. To drift here is to swim through history itself, to move through the bloodstream of time. And like any memory, the ocean does not always welcome intrusion. In recent years, divers and remote drones have reported something stranger still. Walls beneath the ice, not of stone or ice, but of formations that seem constructed. Long ridges rising from the seafloor, perfectly aligned, stretching for miles in patterns that suggest geometry. Columns stacked upon one another like broken pillars. Caverns shaped like chambers, their entrances gaping as though carved. Natural formations, some say, the work of tectonics and erosion. But others whisper of ruins, of something built when this ocean was free from its icy prison. If true, then this sea remembers not just the life of creatures, but the works of beings who once claimed it as their own. And perhaps they never truly left. Microphones sometimes capture echoes that cannot be traced, the sound of something metallic striking stone, the faint reverberation of movement too regular to be natural. Some have compared it to the tolling of bells, deep and distant, as though from a city drowned and long forgotten. Others claim to hear whispers, voices layered upon one another in cadences no human language carries. Whatever the truth, the effect is undeniable. The deeper one listens, the stronger the impression grows that this ocean does not simply hold memory. It speaks it. To descend here is not to explore. It is to trespass into something that remembers more than we could ever bear to know. There comes a moment, deep beneath the frozen ceiling, when the distinction between present and past begins to blur. The ocean no longer feels like water alone. It feels like a vessel, a container brimming with centuries of silence and memory. Every current brushes against the hull like a hand reaching out from another age. Every shadow drifting past seems too deliberate, too ancient to belong to the modern world. It is as though the sea itself is alive, dreaming through the darkness. Explorers speak of the overwhelming sensation of déjà vu in these depths. Hours into a dive, they begin to feel as though they have been here before, as though the landscape of the seabed is not new but remembered. Ridges twist like half-buried spines. Gullies wind in shapes that resemble rivers long dried. Some even claim to see outlines of structures when their lights sweep across the floor. Arches, walls, roads disappearing into sediment. The eye is untrustworthy in the abyss, but the feeling persists. This is not an untouched wilderness. This is a graveyard, or perhaps a ruin. And ruins always have guardians. One dive recorded a moment now shrouded in controversy. At 3 miles beneath the ice, a submersible picked up a rhythmic vibration, a low, steady pulse that grew louder as they approached the trench. The trench itself was strange. Steep walls that looked as though they had been sheared, not eroded, plunging down into blackness. The pulse came from within. The pilot described it as a heartbeat, so steady and powerful that it vibrated through the metal walls of the vessel. Cameras captured only darkness. Sonar registered something massive moving below, larger than the trench itself, shifting slowly, deliberately. Then, without warning, the sound stopped. The ocean fell silent. And in that silence, the submersible shook violently, as though brushed aside by something that did not wish to be seen. The footage was never released in full. Official reports blamed equipment failure, seismic shifts, malfunctions. Yet whispers persist that what the team encountered was not a malfunction at all, but a presence too large, too old, to be acknowledged. For if this ocean remembers, then it remembers not only life but death. Dead things drift here, preserved by cold and darkness. Carcasses of whales, frozen stiff, carried by currents into caverns where they remain intact for decades. Fish entombed in walls of ice, their pale bodies staring sightless into eternity. But there are others. Bones larger than whales, shapes fossilized in shadow, their outlines wrong. Too long, too wide, too curved in ways that belong to no species known on Earth. Photographs exist, circulated quietly among researchers, but they are always incomplete. A curve of vertebrae here, a jawline there, as if the sea itself allows only fragments to surface. What if these are not the remnants of ordinary creatures? What if they are the memories of an older ocean, one that existed before the ice sealed it away? This possibility haunts every expedition. That the sea beneath the cliffs is not merely a place of life, but a repository of things erased from the surface world. Creatures, perhaps civilizations, swallowed by catastrophe and preserved in silence. The songs of the deep may not be songs at all, but echoes of voices that once filled the air above. The more the ice melts, the more these secrets stir. Each year, fissures widen, caves collapse, and new pathways open into chambers unseen for millennia. And each year, the sounds grow louder. The ocean does not remain passive. It is waking, its memories rising like sediment stirred by a storm. What has been buried will not stay hidden. And so we leave the abyss with more questions than answers. The ocean has shown us fragments of its memory, pulses, ruins, bones, but it withholds the whole truth. Perhaps it waits until the gates above collapse entirely. Perhaps it knows that the world above is not ready to remember what it has forgotten. For the ocean does not forget, it only waits. And somewhere in that blackness, beneath miles of frozen ceiling, something vast and ancient shifts once more, as if turning in its sleep. The ocean remembers, and soon it will be remembered. The sea is not only a keeper of memories. It is a graveyard. Beneath the frozen cliffs, where light fails and pressure crushes, the seabed is littered with remains, fragments of lives that once moved with force and grace through the water. Some are familiar, the pale ivory of whale bones scattered across the floor like the ribs of drowned cathedrals. Others are stranger, unfamiliar shapes carved in silence, larger and older than any record should allow. When explorers first lowered cameras into the abyss, they expected emptiness, bare rock, lifeless sediment, and endless dark. Instead, they found skeletons. Some stretched across the seafloor like ghostly highways, curving in arcs that suggested bodies far longer than any ship. Others protruded from cliffsides, half buried in silt, as though the sea itself had entombed them deliberately. The sight was unnerving, almost theatrical, as if some unseen hand had arranged them for discovery. But the true unease came not from their size, nor their number, but from their strangeness. The bones did not match any known anatomy. Vertebrae shaped like discs, massive and hollow. Jaws with too many teeth, curving inward like traps. Ribs that bent at unnatural angles, overlapping like the hull of a ship. These were not the skeletons of modern whales, nor of any creature catalogued by science. They belonged to something else, something lost to time, or to the secrets of this buried sea. Some researchers dared to whisper a forbidden thought, that these were not natural deaths. The arrangement of bones, the clustering of remains in certain trenches, suggested catastrophe. Entire populations wiped out in a single event, swept into the depths and preserved by the cold. What kind of force could erase giants from the face of the earth? A shifting of ice? A collapse of cliffs? Or something alive, something powerful enough to hunt what should have been untouchable? Legends from coastal peoples echo faintly here. Stories of monsters beneath the waves, leviathans that dragged entire ships into the abyss. To modern ears, these tales have always sounded like myth, metaphors for the cruelty of the sea. But staring at the bones beneath the blue, the line between legend and truth grows thin. Perhaps those ancient stories were not born of imagination, but of memory. Warnings passed down from an age when these creatures still roamed. One dive team recorded the discovery of a jawbone so vast it spanned the width of their floodlights. Its teeth were longer than harpoons, sharpened not by wear but by design. The footage shows the divers frozen in silence, their gloved hands trembling as they reached out to touch it. The bone was old, brittle, but unmistakably real. When the submersible's arm brushed against it, clouds of sediment rose like smoke, curling upward as though the sea itself wanted to hide the evidence again. And yet, the deeper they searched, the more bones appeared. Some almost human in their arrangement, limbs, spines, rib cages, though far too large to belong to man. others entirely alien, forms that made no sense at all, spirals of bone, branching lattice like coral, shapes that seemed grown rather than born. Each discovery added to the unease. These were not isolated anomalies. They were the remnants of a world erased. Scientists argue. Some claim these bones are misidentified, the remains of whales warped by pressure and time. Others believe they are fossils carried by glaciers, dropped into the sea when the ice retreated. But none of these explanations account for the sheer number, nor the strangeness of their design. And none explain why they appear concentrated here, beneath the shattered cliffs, as if this place was chosen. What if the ocean beneath the ice is not just a sea, but a tomb? What if this place was where the ancient world came to die? The thought lingers as we drift among the bones. Floodlights sweep across vertebrae that glow pale in the darkness, like ghostly spines reaching toward us. The silence presses in, heavier than the water, heavier than the dark. For it is not the sight of bones alone that chills the explorers. It is the sense, unshakable, undeniable, that something still lingers here, watching, waiting, unwilling to let its dead rest in peace. The first instinct when confronted with these remains is to measure them, to catalog and assign them names. Science demands classification, order, an attempt to tame the chaos of discovery. But in the depths beneath the ice, measurement fails to soothe. Numbers only sharpen the terror. Vertebrae measuring more than a meter across. Rib cages spanning 30 feet. Jaws so immense they could have swallowed a fishing boat whole. Every calculation ends the same way. Whatever these beings were, they dwarfed even the largest whales alive today. And yet, sheer size is not what unsettles most. It is the feeling that these bones tell a story of violence. Many of them are scarred. Long grooves slash across ribs as if carved by teeth or claws. Vertebrae split down the middle, shattered as though crushed under enormous pressure. Jaws snapped in half. These creatures did not all die peacefully. Something killed them. Something strong enough to strike down giants. The implications are almost unbearable. If such predators once existed, what became of them? Did they die out, victims of some global catastrophe? Or do they remain, hidden in chambers too deep to reach, waiting for the world above to crack open? For every scar etched into bone, a question lingers unanswered. Was this a battlefield, a hunting ground, or a massacre? Stories from the frozen north whisper of battles beneath the waves. Inuit traditions speak of Tonarsuk, a spirit said to dwell in the sea, devourer of whales, feared even by shamans. Norse sagas tell of the Hafgufa, a sea monster so large it was mistaken for an island, which would lure prey with its stench before swallowing them whole. Across cultures, separated by oceans and centuries, echoes of the same warning resound. Beware the great bones beneath the sea. Perhaps myths are not born from nothing. Perhaps they are shadows cast by truth. The bones are not only witnesses to violence. Some reveal strange adaptations, features that defy simple classification. One set of remains displayed twin rows of sockets along its spine, as though the creature bore additional limbs or fins. Another revealed a skull with overlapping plates, like armor forged in darkness. If these beings evolved in the lightless abyss, what forces shaped them? Pressure, darkness, hunger, each carving life into monstrous new designs. And then there are the sounds. Hydrophones placed near bone fields often capture faint vibrations, too faint for the human ear, but resonant through instruments. Some resemble clicks, some hums, some pulses like drumbeats. Scientists dismiss them as echoes, the moaning of shifting ice or the groans of stressed metal. But divers who have heard them describe something more, a pattern, a rhythm, a suggestion of intention. As if the bones themselves are not silent, as if memory hums within them. Could the ocean preserve not just the bodies of its dead, but their voices? Could these vibrations be echoes of long-vanished creatures, reverberating endlessly in the dark? The idea seems impossible, and yet it lingers, impossible to disprove. What unsettles most is how the living seem to respond. Whales migrating near these waters have been recorded changing their songs, their melodies bending and twisting into lower, stranger notes. Some refuse to enter the region at all, turning sharply as though repelled by an invisible barrier. It is as if they know what lies beneath, as if they recognize the bones of old enemies. And so the seabed becomes a warning, a map written in ivory, telling a story no one wants to read. Every scar, every fracture, every unnatural shape is a sentence in that story. Together, they speak of an ancient ocean that was anything but peaceful. They tell of predators so vast that even the greatest of today's whales were prey. They whisper of a world erased, but not forgotten, for the bones remain, silent, pale, unyielding. They rest beneath the blue, half buried in shadow, as if waiting for the moment they are no longer just relics, but harbingers. And as the ice melts above, the boundary between past and present thins. The bones are no longer only history. They are prophecy. There is a peculiar silence that settles when one drifts among the bones. It is not the ordinary quiet of the deep, where sound travels in muted waves, but a silence that feels deliberate, oppressive, as though the ocean itself holds its breath. Divers speak of it in whispers afterward, recalling the sensation that every movement, every exhaled bubble, was intruding upon sacred ground. The graveyard beneath the ice does not welcome visitors. It tolerates them. Perhaps that is why so many who enter describe an overwhelming sense of being watched. Cameras capture only emptiness. Sonar reveals nothing but ridges and stone. Yet the feeling persists. It presses in from every side, a weight heavier than the water, more suffocating than the dark. The bones may lie still, but the abyss around them feels alive, as if the dead are not entirely dead. One expedition recorded a moment that remains unspoken in official reports. As the submersible drifted through a canyon littered with vertebrae, a faint tremor began to ripple through the silt. At first, it seemed like a current, a shifting of sand. Then came the sound, low, resonant, almost mournful. A vibration that shook the instruments, rattled teeth, and lingered in the chest like the aftershock of thunder. It grew stronger, not from above or below, but from all directions at once. And then, without warning, the bone field stirred. Fragments rose into the water, suspended like dust in a shaft of light. The silt lifted, swirling into clouds. A rib shifted, dislodged as though shaken by unseen hands. For a heartbeat, the explorers thought the skeleton itself was rising, piecing together, returning to life. Panic surged. Floodlights whipped across the trench, chasing shadows that seemed to move too quickly to be illusions. But when the vibrations ceased, the silence returned. The bones lay still once more, unchanged, except for the memory it left behind. What force could stir the dead of the sea? Some suggest tectonic movement, the grinding of stone beneath unimaginable weight. Others whisper darker theories, that these bones rest not in silence, but in waiting. That something massive shifts beneath them, restless, stirring the graveyard like a sleeper turning in its bed. And then there is the most unsettling possibility of all, that these bones are not relics of the past, but warnings of the present. That what killed them is not gone. For though no living eye has ever seen such a predator, there are signs. Nets shredded into ribbons as though by blades. Submersibles returning scarred. Dents and gouges etched into steel by something far stronger than rock. Recordings of screams carried through the water. Not human screams, but calls so raw, so powerful, they vibrate through the marrow. The ocean guards its secrets fiercely, but it cannot hide the fear of its living children. Whales flee these waters, their songs turning mournful, desperate, before falling silent. Seals abandon hunting grounds. Even fish scatter in patterns too frantic to be random. The living world knows. It remembers. And so we are left with the bones, not merely as remnants, but as omens. Pale monuments to battles fought in an age before memory. Warnings carved in ivory, whispering to those who dare to listen. Yet even as explorers retreat, their minds haunted by what they have seen, they cannot resist returning. For the bones beneath the blue call out in silence, in vibration, in the strange gravity of their presence. They pull at curiosity, at fear, at the unshakable need to know. What lies beyond them? What greater truth waits beneath the graveyard's floor, deeper than light can reach? The answer stirs in the black water, vast and patient. Something that turned the ocean into a tomb. Something that has not yet finished its work. And as the ice above groans and fractures, as fissures widen into gates, the world draws closer to meeting it again. The bones are not the end of the story. They are the beginning. The ice was once thought eternal, a wall of white, unbroken and immovable, stretching beyond sight, a fortress guarding the secrets below. For centuries it stood untouched, its surface reflecting the pale sun like glass, its cliffs echoing with the groan of winds. To those who looked upon it, the ice seemed a monument outside of time, immune to change. But nothing in nature is eternal. And now, the fortress is cracking. The sound comes first. Travelers speak of it with awe and dread. The thunder that rolls not from the sky, but from the earth itself. A splitting roar that shakes the air. At times, it is distant, like a storm muffled beyond mountains. At others, it erupts beneath their feet, sharp and violent, a sound that feels alive. These are the voices of the ice cliffs, voices of collapse, of fracture, of endings long delayed. From above, the cracks appear almost delicate. Thin white lines spiderwebbing across a blue-white plain, branching, widening, intersecting like veins. But from within, they are vast, yawning chasms that descend hundreds of feet, swallowing explorers whole if they dare to stray too close. Some fissures glow an unnatural shade of turquoise, light bending through compressed centuries of frozen layers. Others are dark, bottomless voids, their depths inhaling sound until nothing returns. Each crack is a wound, and each wound is spreading. As the climate shifts and temperatures rise, the great cliffs weep. Meltwater streams carve paths across their faces, trickling down like tears. Pools gather in hidden basins, pressing weight into fractures until they burst apart. Whole towers of ice, taller than cathedrals, lean, tremble, and then fall, shattering into the sea with a force that sends shock waves for miles. The ocean, already restless, surges upward in fury, its waves carrying chunks of ancient ice like drifting tombstones. And yet, even in collapse, the cliffs are not silent. For with every fracture, every falling wall, something long hidden awakens. Dark shapes emerge in the cracks, voids, tunnels, chambers once sealed. These are not the smooth hollows of ice alone, but passages that lead deeper into spaces untouched for millennia. Some echo with the rush of water pouring into them. Others resonate with sounds that cannot be explained. Low pulses, groans, whispers that seem too regular to be the language of shifting stone. Scientists warn that these collapses are gateways. That as the cliffs crumble, they do not simply vanish into the ocean, but open doors into the buried world beneath. Doors through which not only water, but memory escapes. What drifts out is not always seen, but often heard. Strange calls that echo through fjords, reverberating in tones too deep for human hearing. Fishermen describe nights where the sea seems to breathe, exhaling warmth from beneath the ice, carrying with it the smell of rot, of salt, of something long confined. There is a strange duality to this breaking. To the eye, it is destruction, the unraveling of something ancient. To the ear, it is birth, a return, a re-emergence. Each collapse is both an ending and an opening. What has been sealed for centuries is stirring, and the gates above can no longer hold. Those who stand on the cliffs during these moments speak of dread not from what they see, but from what they feel. The ground shudders beneath their boots. The air hums with vibration. The sea below churns as though something vast moves just beneath its surface, waiting for the walls to fall. And when the final roar comes, when the ice gives way in a storm of splintering shards, the silence that follows is worse than the thunder. For it is then that the abyss breathes. The first collapse is always the most shocking. A roar like cannon fire echoes across the frozen plains, followed by a silence so profound it feels as though the world itself has paused to listen. Then, the cliff face gives way. Thousands of tons of ice shear from the wall, plunging downward in a slow-motion avalanche. The fragments crash into the sea, sending waves racing outward, carving scars into the coastline. What was once immovable has become fragile, undone in seconds. But the collapse is not merely spectacle. Each fracture uncovers hidden passages, hollow veins that run through the cliffs like arteries. Explorers who dare to enter them speak of cathedrals of ice, chambers so vast their ceilings vanish into darkness, lit only by the pale glow of compressed centuries. Some tunnels hum with wind, others drip with the steady rhythm of meltwater. But the strangest are those that echo with sound when no one speaks. Whispers travel through their walls, distorted, repeated, multiplied, until it feels as though the ice itself is breathing words it does not understand. Cameras sent into these passages have revealed more than frozen caverns. In some, walls are lined with shapes too regular to be natural. Arcs, spirals, formations that resemble carvings. In others, explorers have found embedded fragments, bones, wood, shards of stone, preserved like insects in amber. These relics tell stories of things not meant to be uncovered. A tusk protruding from a wall, its ivory stained black. The mast of a ship, snapped in half, its ropes still clinging to frozen timber. And stranger still, structures that defy explanation. Pillars of ice so perfectly aligned, they resemble columns, arranged as if they were part of some forgotten architecture. The cliffs are not only collapsing, they are unveiling. And with unveiling comes release. Ocean currents surge through the new gateways, carrying with them warmth from below. Scientists measure shifts in salinity, strange chemicals that bleed upward into the water. Fishermen report catches of fish with pale skin and translucent flesh, their eyes underdeveloped as though shaped by darkness. Some bring up creatures never before recorded, forms so alien they seem sculpted by nightmare. Limbs too long, jaws that unhinge, bodies that glow faintly even in daylight. They rise with the tides like emissaries from another world, warnings carried by the waves. But the most unsettling are the sounds. Hydrophones lowered into the fresh fractures record voices unlike anything heard before. Deep pulses echo as though something immense is calling from beneath. Higher tones spiral upward, weaving patterns too complex to be chance. On some recordings, the sounds overlap, layering into what seems like dialogue, call and response, question and answer, as if the ocean itself is conversing with the ice. For those who listen long enough, a darker impression takes hold. These are not random sounds. They are not the chaos of shifting stone or breaking ice. They are patterns, language. And if it is language, then it has an intent. Whales, too, seem to recognize it. Pods that once migrated calmly past the cliffs now hesitate, circling, their songs altered to deeper, slower notes. Some flee entirely, vanishing from waters they had traveled for generations. Others approach cautiously, their songs intertwining with the new voices, as though attempting to answer. The recordings are haunting, the mournful resonance of whales harmonizing with something older, something hidden, something rising. With every collapse, the cliffs lose not only mass but meaning. They are no longer walls of protection, but gates ajar, portals through which the buried world breathes again. And what breathes is not gentle. It is vast, restless, remembering. Those who stand at the edge during these moments often describe the same sensation. The ground beneath them trembling not from falling ice, but from something beneath the sea pressing upward. As though the cliffs were never meant to last. As though they were not guardians, but prison bars. And now those bars are breaking. There comes a moment when the cliffs no longer groan, no longer whisper. They scream. The sound of collapse is unlike any other in nature. A tearing roar that begins in the bones, reverberates through the chest, and shatters into the air with the violence of thunder. 1,000-year-old wall buckles in seconds, splintering into towers of white that twist and tumble as though gravity itself rejoices in their fall. The ocean swallows them hungrily, waves surging outward in walls of water that crash against the coast with merciless force. For miles, the world shakes with the violence of ice undone. But what terrifies witnesses most is not the fall itself. It is what follows. The sea does not settle quickly after a collapse. It churns, restless, as though stirred by something more than falling ice. Bubbles rise in thick streams, releasing gas long sealed away, a bitter stench of sulfur and decay spreading across the waves. The water darkens not only from sediment but from something older, thicker, seeping upward like ink. And then come the shapes. Divers describe them first as shadows, long, winding forms that twist beneath the surface. Some resemble colossal spines, others the sweep of fins or the arc of jaws. None are whole, never clear enough to name, but each unmistakably alive. They move with purpose, circling, vanishing into darkness only to return again, closer. Cameras capture fragments, a ripple too large for any fish, a silhouette passing in front of the submersible light, eyes that glimmer once before retreating. Each glimpse is too brief, too distorted to be proof, yet enough to leave no doubt. Something has been waiting, and the cliffs were its gates. With each collapse, more of the sea awakens. Strange currents surge upward, bringing warmth from below. The water seems to breathe, inhaling and exhaling with rhythms too steady to be chance. On certain nights, when the moon casts pale light across the ruins of fallen ice, observers claim to see the sea pulse, rising and falling as though mimicking the chest of some vast creature slumbering beneath. It is in these moments that the fear becomes unbearable. Not fear of what has been found, but of what remains unseen. If the bones beneath the blue were warnings, then the breaking ice is an invitation, and the ocean accepts. Legends that once seemed like myth begin to sound prophetic. Old tales of leviathans rising when the world warms, of seas reclaiming what was theirs, whispers of gates that must never be opened. Now the gates are opening, and the sea does not hesitate. Some researchers warn that the greatest danger is not what emerges, but what escapes. Ancient bacteria, frozen for millennia, carried upward in meltwater. Gases sealed beneath the cliffs, released in clouds that poison air and sea alike. Yet these explanations, rational as they are, fail to quiet the deeper terror. The certainty that something far larger, far older, is moving beneath the waves. Something that the cliffs once restrained, and which now stirs in freedom. Fishermen along the edges of the polar seas speak of nights when the water is too still, when their boats drift as though caught in breathless silence. Then, without warning, waves rise from nowhere, rocking their vessels, while a deep vibration hums through the hulls. One crew swears they saw the ocean split, a line of rising water parting as though something immense passed just beneath. They returned to shore pale, trembling, and refused to sail again. The ice is no longer a fortress. It is rubble. The sea no longer whispers of memory. It roars of return. And as the cliffs fall piece by piece, The abyss widens, its voice growing louder, its breath stronger, its presence undeniable. For when the ice breaks, it does not only reveal, it releases. And what has been released is not silent, it is vast, it is patient, and it is rising. The night sky above Antarctica is a cathedral of silence. Stars burn with an icy brilliance, unfiltered by city lights, while the aurora drapes its emerald curtains across the heavens. Yet beneath this breathtaking display, the earth itself trembles. Not violently, not with the chaos of an earthquake, but with a subtle rhythm, a low pulse that feels almost alive. Scientists monitoring seismic activity describe it as resonant oscillations, the deep, recurring vibrations that ripple through both land and sea. But those who stand in the silence of the polar night swear they can hear it, a heartbeat in the frozen dark. The world is not ending. It is remembering. One discovery in particular rattles the scientific world. A colossal ring, nearly 50 kilometers wide, half buried beneath layers of ice and sediment. At first, it was assumed to be volcanic, but further scans reveal construction. Immense stone blocks interlocked in patterns similar to megalithic sites across the globe. Except this is older, much older. If the dating is accurate, the structure predates every known civilization, stretching back to a time when humans were not believed capable of such feats. The conclusion is unavoidable. Antarctica was once more than ice. It was a cradle, a stage upon which a forgotten chapter of humanity, or perhaps something not entirely human, once played. And now, that stage is being unveiled. But with each revelation comes consequence. Where the ice collapses, the sea behaves unnaturally. Tides no longer follow predictable rhythms. Fishermen thousands of miles away report swells rising without storms, as if pulled by forces beyond the moon's gravity. Marine biologists tracking migration patterns note strange disruptions. Whales abandoning their roots, pods clustering in unusual formations, moving as though guided by an unseen call. Satellite data shows enormous shadows in the deep ocean trenches, moving faster than any known species, changing course as though responding to the fractures in Antarctica. And then there are the disappearances. Research vessels, ships manned by some of the world's most brilliant scientists, begin to vanish. Their signals cut abruptly, black boxes silent. In one case, fragments of a ship are later found washed ashore on South Georgia Island, twisted as though crushed by impossible pressure. Survivors are rare, but the few who return speak of storms that rose from clear skies, of whirlpools that swallowed entire craft, of a sound beneath the waves that grew so loud it drowned out thought, a voice not heard but felt. Governments, as expected, deny. Reports vanish from the public record, explained away as equipment failure or human error. Yet whispers circulate in shadowed corridors that the vanished ships had seen too much, that their instruments captured what they were never meant to record, that somewhere, deep beneath the black water, a door has opened, and through it, something watches. Eyewitness accounts become harder to suppress. Crewmen describe colossal silhouettes rising beneath their ships, blotting out the seafloor. Submarine pilots insist they glimpse lights flickering in the abyss, arranged in patterns, not the randomness of bioluminescent fish, but deliberate formations like signals. One chilling report tells of a shape so vast it stretched beyond sonar range, moving with the slow, purposeful grace of an intelligence ancient and unbothered. It is not just the sea that stirs. The sky too grows strange. Auroras shift in ways scientists cannot explain, colors twisting into spectrums beyond the visible. Instruments detect bursts of radiation, unlike solar flares, localized instead to regions above Antarctica's breaking ice. And in rare moments, observers on the ice claim the aurora itself responds, flickering brighter when the cliffs collapse, pulsing in rhythm with the sea's hidden heartbeat. It is as though Earth itself is awakening, stirring an ancient memory buried beneath its frozen skin. Theories multiply. Some argue the ice shields more than ruins. It covers technology, perhaps not human at all. Others whisper of entities entombed in the frozen abyss, preserved through epochs until the warmth of a changing climate sets them free. And then there are those who say this is not awakening, but return. That what once ruled the seas has always been here, waiting for the moment when the world itself would summon them back. Yet amidst the fear, there is fascination. For if the vanished world returns, it brings with it not only terror, but knowledge. The possibility that humanity is not the first to walk this earth with fire and stone, nor the first to gaze into the abyss and be gazed upon in return. That the ruins beneath the ice may hold truths about our origins, our myths, our future. But fascination is fragile when the sea begins to move. In one chilling incident, a crew stationed near the Larsen Sea ice shelf reported the ocean parting, not dramatically, not with biblical grandeur, but subtly, unnaturally. For minutes, the water around their vessel flattened, unnervingly still. Then it began to sink, as though drawn downward, before surging upward in a single colossal swell that nearly capsized them. One scientist, shaken and pale, described it simply. It was like the sea inhaled. And then it exhaled. The cliffs are falling faster now. The gates are widening. And through them, the vanished world does not creep. It surges. What once was myth is now manifestation. The drowned world, the sunken realm, the leviathans of forgotten legend, all whisper the same truth. The vanished world is returning. And the question that terrifies us most is not what it is. It is whether we were ever meant to survive its return. The sea no longer hides its unease. What began as distant tremors, subtle tides, and faint echoes now unfolds in spectacle, raw, undeniable, and terrifying. Antarctica's cliffs collapse in thunderous cascades, walls of ice taller than cathedrals breaking free and shattering into the ocean. The waves they birth roll outward for miles, carrying with them chunks of ancient stone once imprisoned beneath the glaciers. These fragments, when examined, are not shapeless masses of rock. They are cut, chiseled, and scarred with markings that bear the unmistakable touch of deliberate hands. Symbols, geometry, language. Some are etched in spirals that mirror constellations. Others are carved into shapes resembling eyes, circles within circles, gazing outward. Archaeologists argue fiercely over their meaning, but all agree on one haunting truth. These stones did not belong to ice. They belong to a city, and that city is stirring beneath the waves. The world begins to notice, not through press conferences or official reports, but through the chaos of leaked footage, shaky recordings, and the voices of those who live through what governments refuse to acknowledge. A viral clip shows a fishing trawler rocking violently as an enormous shape passes beneath it, the water glowing faintly with bioluminescence. Another shows an oil platform in the South Atlantic vanishing into a whirlpool, the horizon folding as though pulled into the depths. And perhaps most haunting of all, a satellite feed briefly streamed before being cut, depicting a circular glow in the Southern Ocean, widening like an opening eye. For the first time in centuries, humanity feels small. Scientists, cornered by the sheer volume of evidence, attempt explanations. They speak of methane bursts, oceanic vents, geothermal instability. But their words falter when faced with the mounting strangeness. Oceanographers report new currents forming where none existed before, streams of warm water rising from the abyss, cutting through the frigid seas like veins of fire. Sailors describe the smell of ozone above calm waters, as though a storm lingers unseen in the air itself. And still, the sound grows louder. That low, resonant hum once confined to seismographs now echoes through the hulls of ships, rattles glass, and presses against the chest like the weight of another heartbeat, not our own. Something is not just emerging. It is calling. Across the world, animals respond before humans fully grasp the danger. Birds veer from their migratory paths, wheeling erratically in skies that glow faintly at night. Whales beach themselves in staggering numbers, their bodies lining coastlines like offerings. Even domestic animals, dogs, cats, livestock, grow restless, howling at unseen horizons, refusing food, pacing in endless circles. Some biologists suggest they are sensing magnetic disturbances. Others whisper older explanations: instinct, memory, a primal recognition of something ancient returning. And then, for the first time, the sea gives a glimpse. It happens at dawn. A research vessel, monitoring collapses along the Ross Ice Shelf, captures the footage. At first, it appears to be another iceberg breaking free. But as the ice fractures, something beneath it shifts. A shadow, vast, elongated, the size of a mountain ridge, yet moving with fluid precision. Cameras track it as it rises toward the surface until the water boils and foams. For a moment, the dark form breaks the waves. Not fully, never fully, but enough. Enough to show ridges, scales, structures that gleam wet beneath the early sun. Enough to suggest it is not one creature, but many, rising in unison, their bodies intertwined like a wall of living architecture. The footage cuts, but those who saw it before suppression describe the same image: an eye, towering, lidless, glimmering with pale light, opening beneath the water and fixing itself on the lens. Panic spreads faster than silence can contain. Religions claim prophecy fulfilled. Some hail it as the return of ancient gods, drowned kings reclaiming their thrones. Others insist it is punishment, a reckoning for humanity's arrogance, its destruction of the planet's balance. Conspiracy theorists point to the alignment of global myths: the drowned city of Atlantis, the gates of Relia, the Maori stories of a sea giant that sleeps beneath the waves. Cults form, gathering at coastlines to chant into the surf, waiting for the return. Governments crack down, censoring footage, tightening borders, dispatching naval fleets to cordon the southern seas. Yet no wall of ships, no satellites, no weapons can deny the truth rising beneath the ice. The vanished world is not just memory, it is motion. Soon, the ocean begins to behave like a living thing. Waves no longer travel in predictable patterns. Instead, swells form in sequences, rhythmic, deliberate, almost musical. Instruments detect subsonic pulses beneath them, structured like code, like language. Linguists who dare to analyze the data recognize repeating patterns, sequences resembling both mathematical order and linguistic rhythm. The sea is speaking, and it is speaking to us. But what message does it carry? Warning? Invitation? Or conquest? In coastal towns across the southern hemisphere, strange phenomena follow. Lights beneath harbors at night. Murmurs in the water that mimic human voices. Fishermen swear they hear their names called by the waves, as though the ocean itself remembers them. In Chile, a diver disappears during a salvage operation, leaving behind only his final recording. Frantic breaths, then silence, and finally, a whisper not his own. Low, echoing, ancient. Still, humanity resists its insignificance. Military fleets converge near the Weddell Sea, deploying drones and submarines to investigate the widening fractures. What they encounter never reaches official reports, but fragments leak through classified channels. Entire vessels dragged downward, hulls torn open by pressures no depth should hold. Sonar screens filled with movement too vast to comprehend. Survivors return with eyes hollow, voices trembling, repeating the same phrase: "It's awake." And so the narrative shifts. No longer do we ask if something exists beneath the ice. No longer do we debate myth versus science. Now, the question narrows, sharpens, like the point of a blade. What happens when it decides to rise? The vanished world no longer hides in silence. Its heartbeat echoes through stone, through ice, through the marrow of the earth itself. The cliffs fall, the waters churn, the auroras burn brighter, bending in unnatural colors. And everywhere, humanity feels the same truth settling like frost on the soul. The gate has opened. What comes through will not be contained. The night it happens, the world is not watching, but the world feels it. Across continents, seismographs quiver with violent precision, not the jagged tremors of earthquakes, but a single synchronized pulse. A heartbeat, vast, deep, echoing through rock, soil, and sea. Dogs howl in unison in cities thousands of miles from the ice. Birds erupt into flight at midnight, darkening skies that should have been calm. And in the southern seas, instruments shatter under pressure as the ocean rises in ways no storm could explain. The gate has opened. Off the coast of Antarctica, the sky burns green and violet. Auroras stretch downward like fingers, flickering across the black surface of the water. Fleets dispatched to monitor the collapse of the ice find themselves surrounded by swells that do not break. Walls of water holding steady as though awaiting a signal. And then, from beneath, the light begins. At first, it is faint, a shimmer in the depths, like moonlight refracted through endless glass. But it grows, expanding, until the entire ocean floor glows with pale luminescence. Sonar screams with distortion. Shadows surge upward, too vast for scale, too fluid for geometry. Cameras capture glimpses, arcs like ridged spines, towers of flesh that rise and vanish, structures half living, half stone, breaking the waves only to sink again. It is not one thing, it is many. An entire world, long drowned, rising from its exile. The cliffs collapse in chorus. Entire shelves of ice roar as they fall, thunder echoing across the globe. In their place, the ocean exhales something older than memory. Massive structures breach the surface, not icebergs, but towers. Black stone slick with brine, carved with spirals and eyes, glowing faintly with the same pale fire that burns beneath the sea. Some stand jagged, fractured by millennia of pressure. Others rise intact, symmetrical, deliberate. Together, they form outlines unmistakable, even from satellites. Avenues, plazas, walls. A city. The drowned metropolis of myth has returned, not as rubble, but as revelation. Atlantis, Mu, Lemuria, names given by cultures far removed in time and place, now converging into a single truth. The vanished world had never been lost. It had been waiting. And then the silence breaks. From the depths, a sound emerges, deeper than thunder, longer than any storm. It is not heard with the ears, but felt in the chest, the bones, the blood itself. A resonance that bends the air, shatters glass, ripples across oceans. Ships buckle under its weight. Instruments record frequencies, both subsonic and ultrasonic, layers stacked like a language too vast to decipher. But to those who hear it, the meaning is undeniable. It is not chaos, it is communication. The ocean speaks, panic ignites. Navies fire into the water, missiles streaking into the abyss. Explosions bloom, but the sea does not resist. The waves absorb the violence, rolling outward, harmless, dismissive. And then the water rises slowly, deliberately, as if responding. Fleets vanish beneath swells larger than mountains. Cities along distant coasts tremble as tides surge against their walls, flooding streets. Satellites track it all in chilling silence, until the auroras themselves distort, rippling not with natural beauty, but with shapes. Symbols burning across the night sky, mirroring the carvings on the stones below. It is no longer myth. It is no longer science. It is encounter. For hours, the world watches as the southern ocean transforms. Towers rise. Bridges break the surface. Shapes move within the glowing streets beneath the waves, too fluid to be human, too deliberate to be anything but alive. And then, For the first time, they breach. Not in full, never in full. Only fragments, glimpses that sear into memory. A ridge of spines arcing higher than skyscrapers. A hand, if it can be called that, brushing the waves with tendrils like stone wrapped in flesh. Eyes, vast, lidless, glowing with the same pale light that floods the sea. Some swear they see faces, ancient and regal. Others insist the shapes are too alien to comprehend. But all agree on one truth. They are not beasts. They are architects, builders. The city itself is alive, and it has awakened with them. What humanity built in millennia, this world had built in silence, hidden beneath the ice. And now it stretches outward, reclaiming the seas with the inevitability of a tide. The world above descends into chaos. Stock markets crash. Governments collapse under the weight of denial breaking into truth. Religions fracture, some declaring salvation, others condemning apocalypse. Millions gather along coasts, staring at horizons that glow faintly with pale light. Some flee inland. Others wait, transfixed, as though compelled by an ancient memory buried in the marrow of humankind. And still the ocean speaks, not in words, not in language we can translate, but in rhythm, in resonance, in pulses that seem to align with our own heartbeat. Those who spend too long near the waves report visions, cities of black stone under alien stars, skies that burn with auroras of gold and red, oceans where towers move like living things. Some collapse, whispering fragments of words they never knew, syllables that echo the spirals carved into the stone. Others emerge changed, calm, as though understanding something the rest of us cannot. But for most, there is only fear. The final breach comes not with violence, but with inevitability. At the center of the rising city, where towers curve into a ring, the sea opens. A column of water erupts upward, spiraling like a cyclone, glowing with inner fire. From within, a figure rises, not a creature, not entirely. It is both structure and flesh, both mountain and movement. It dwarfs the tallest ships, its surface inscribed with spirals that shift as though alive. Its form defies definition, part temple, part titan, part storm made solid. And in the silence of its emergence, the world understands. This is not the return of a species. It is the return of a realm. The vanished world does not belong to history. It belongs to now. The city stands. The ocean glows. The auroras burn with symbols. And across the earth, every myth ever told feels less like story and more like memory. The question is no longer what has returned. It is what place humanity will hold in a world that was never truly ours. The silence after the rising is worse than the chaos that came before. For days, storms had raged across the southern ocean. The auroras had burned with unnatural fire, and the sea had lifted towers of black stone into the living world. But now, stillness. The waves flatten into glass. The winds die. The sky itself seems to hold its breath. Only the faint hum remains, vibrating through air and water alike, pressing into the chest like a second heartbeat. Humanity waits, paralyzed. From space, satellites capture the full scale of what has emerged. Where once there was only ocean and ice, now spreads a vast ring of stone and shadow, a city that dwarfs any creation of mankind. Towers stretch outward like the ribs of a colossal being. Bridges arc across channels of glowing water, and at its center burns a light too bright for instruments to parse. The vanished world has not simply returned, it has rewritten the map. But with its revelation comes a question no scientist, soldier, or prophet can answer. What does it want? Ships approach cautiously, their hulls trembling with the hum. Drones are dispatched, flying low over the stone avenues that shimmer with water. The footage is chilling. Streets spiral outward in patterns that mirror galaxies, their surfaces carved with symbols that shift when not directly observed. Archways pulse faintly as though alive, while shadows move beneath the glowing currents, vanishing before cameras can focus. In one recording, a drone passes through a vast hall open to the sky. For a heartbeat, something moves across the stone. Not human, not animal, but deliberate. Then the feed cuts, as if swallowed. What emerges instead is a sound. Low, resonant, echoing across every speaker, regardless of channel or interference. It is the same pulse that shakes the ocean, now transmitted directly into the machines of humanity. A voice, if it can be called that, bridging stone, sea, and signal. It is speaking to us. But the meaning is divided. Linguists argue it is language, syllables nested within resonance. Physicists suggest it is mathematics, a coded structure expressing universal laws. Theologians claim it is revelation, a voice older than God's. And yet, to those who hear it, the reaction is the same, all laced with terror. Some collapse, weeping. Others stare blankly, whispering fragments of words that make no sense, yet feel impossibly familiar. Then the dreams begin. Across the globe, people report visions in the night. Dreams of black towers rising beneath alien skies, of oceans stretching endlessly under constellations unseen. Some dream of walking the spiral streets, their hands brushing stone that pulses like skin. Others dream of drowning, yet in their final breath, feeling not fear, but belonging. These visions spread without pattern, touching farmers in remote fields, children in crowded cities, soldiers on watch in silent deserts. The vanished world is no longer confined to Antarctica. It has entered the human mind. Governments fracture under the weight of it. Some declare war, their fleets firing missiles into the rising towers, only to watch the sea absorb their violence without harm. Others declare surrender, broadcasting messages of peace into the abyss. Cults grow into movements, millions abandoning homes to gather on coasts, singing into the waves, waiting for the sea to answer. And all the while, the hum deepens, louder, closer, like footsteps approaching. And then, the first city falls. It begins with water. New York, Rio, Shanghai. Tides rise without warning, swallowing streets in minutes. Not tsunamis, not storms, but deliberate, rhythmic floods that recede only to return stronger. Structures crumble. Power grids fail. Panic erupts. Yet, in the chaos, survivors speak of something stranger. The water glows. Pale light runs through the waves, shaping spirals in flooded avenues, symbols that linger even after the streets dry. Some swear they hear whispers in the rushing tide, voices urging them inland, guiding them away. Others hear nothing but the roar of drowning. The message is unclear, warning or calling. And still, the city in the south grows. Towers climb higher, their black stone gleaming beneath auroras that no longer confine themselves to polar skies. The spirals appear above London, Cairo, Sydney, light etched into the heavens, matching the carvings on the ancient stone. Humanity begins to wonder if this is not simply a return, but a reclamation. If Earth was never ours to inherit, but borrowed ground, now reclaimed by its first architects. But in the face of despair, some cling to hope. Deep within laboratories, scientists parse the pulses, mapping their patterns against human DNA, cosmic background radiation, the structures of mathematics itself. What they find is staggering. Alignment. The resonance matches sequences embedded in the very code of life, patterns in our genes long considered meaningless. The hum is not alien. It is familiar. It is inside us. And so a final theory emerges, whispered first in fear, then in wonder. Perhaps humanity is not a mistake, nor an intrusion, but an echo. Perhaps the vanished world is not a foreign invader, but our origin. We are not separate from it. We are its children, and now the parent has returned. But what does a parent do when they find their children have remade the world without them? In the final hours of that long silence, the sea answers. The towers tremble. The central light expands, spilling outward like a second sun. The hum peaks, resonating through bone, stone, sky. And then, movement. From the heart of the city, shapes rise. Not fully seen, not fully understood, but vast, majestic, terrifying. They stretch upward, blotting out auroras, their forms impossible to hold in thought. Some scream. Some fall to their knees. Some simply stare, broken by awe. The vanished world has returned, and with it a question that no one can escape. Is this the end of humanity's story? Or the beginning of something greater than we ever imagined? The sea does not answer. It does not need to. The silence says everything. At the edges of the world, where ice once ruled and silence once reigned, something vast now stands in its place. The city glows beneath the polar night, towers of black stone rising like teeth from the sea, each etched with spirals that twist as though alive. Auroras bleed across the sky in colors never before seen, burning crimson, violet, and silver, weaving together like script written on the heavens themselves. The ocean hums, steady and unrelenting, a resonance that binds air, land, and flesh into one trembling rhythm. Humanity stands transfixed, for though the vanished world has returned, it has not yet spoken its final intent. Weeks pass. The world holds its breath. Cities inland swell with refugees as coastlines are abandoned, yet some refuse to flee. On cliffs and beaches across continents, people gather each night to watch the horizon. They watch the glow in the south, faint but growing, a ghostly fire that reflects off the clouds. They whisper prayers, chants, and names of gods, both remembered and forgotten. For the first time in history, billions of eyes turn to the same horizon, the same question. And in that silence, something remarkable begins. The hum changes. Subtle at first, like a key shifting in a hidden lock. Scientists record new layers within the resonance, harmonics that align with the frequency of the human voice. Patterns emerge, sequences of rhythm and pause that resemble breathing. The ocean, it seems, is not just calling. It is listening. Across the world, dreamers become messengers. Thousands speak of visions that feel less like dreams and more like transmissions. Cities of spirals where oceans stretch to alien stars. Figures of light teaching with gestures older than speech. Some awaken with new languages on their tongues, fragments of syllables that mirror the pulses in the sea. A few are driven to madness, unable to bear the weight of voices echoing through their minds. But others awaken changed, calm, focused, as if the vanished world had chosen them. Governments try to contain them, fearing infiltration, fearing surrender. But the tide of change cannot be stopped. These voices rise from all walks of life: children, scholars, farmers, soldiers. They gather in secret, drawn together by instinct, and when they chant in unison, the sea responds. Waves ripple, the aurora flares, and the hum deepens as though acknowledging its own reflection. Humanity begins to fracture. One half clings to resistance, building weapons in desperation, preparing for a war that may already be lost. The other half kneels at the shore, ready to accept what has come, ready to step into the spiral streets and follow the resonance wherever it leads. Between them hangs a question that is no longer about survival, but identity. Are we defenders of a world that was never ours, or heirs to a legacy we cannot yet comprehend? And then, one night, the silence breaks again. It begins with the aurora. Across the globe, the skies ignite. Not faint curtains, not fleeting arcs, but blazing rivers of light that stretch from pole to pole. Every horizon glows with spirals etched into the sky, burning like constellations drawn by a hand too vast to imagine. The seas rise in response, not violently, but with purpose, lifting ships and shorelines alike in a tide that feels deliberate. And from the city in the south, the hum peaks into a sound unmistakably alive. A voice. It is not language, not as we know it. It is not words, but something deeper. Yet every soul that hears it understands the same truth. It is not asking. It is not threatening. It is declaring. The world is no longer divided between land and sea, between past and present. The world is whole again. Some collapse in terror. Some fall in worship. Some stand in silence, tears on their faces, knowing instinctively that they have witnessed the return of something far older than gods or empires. Something that was always here, beneath the ice, waiting for the moment the earth itself called it forth. The days that follow blur into legend. Fleets vanish into glowing waters, not destroyed, but absorbed. The chosen, those whose dreams aligned with the resonance, walk into the sea and do not return. Inland cities, shielded from the waves, report new growth. Forests rising in weeks, rivers flowing where deserts once lay. The earth reshapes itself, guided by hands unseen. Humanity can no longer claim mastery over a planet that never belonged to it, and yet it is not annihilation. Not entirely. For while some vanish, others remain. Those who cling to the old world continue to survive in its cracks and shadows. The city in the south grows, but it does not spread endlessly. Its towers hold their ground. Its spirals reach upward, as though content to exist beside us, not above us. The vanished world does not erase. It reclaims. It reminds. It waits. And so humanity lingers in the tension between extinction and transformation, uncertain which path it walks. Each night, the horizon glows a little brighter. Each dream carries a little more weight. Each heartbeat feels a little less like our own, and a little more like an echo. The documentary ends not with answers, but with a vision. A lone figure stands on a cliff, staring out at the glowing sea. Behind them, the world of humans, cities, machines, lights. Before them, the vanished world. Spirals, shadows rising in the aurora. Between the two, the waves whisper a question older than history itself. The figure does not speak. They only step forward, and the sea accepts them. The screen fades to black, and a single line lingers like a memory. We were never alone. We were only waiting to remember. The old world ended not with fire, nor with ruin, but with a sound. A hum that threaded itself through the marrow of the earth and rewrote the silence of the seas. For some, it was the voice of God's awakening. For others, it was the death knell of civilization. Yet in truth, it was neither. It was the resonance of a planet reclaiming its rhythm, weaving humanity into a song far older than their empires, older than their wars. Months have passed since the towers rose from beneath the polar ice. Cities that once stood as monuments to human defiance now lie abandoned, swallowed not by destruction but by surrender. Coastlines have become altars. Whole populations stand at the water's edge each dusk, staring out into the shimmering horizon where spirals of light carve messages across the sea. The questions of survival and conquest have faded. What lingers now is adaptation. The resonance age, they call it. No longer measured by calendars or nations, but by the rhythm of the hum. Its pulses echo across oceans and through the bones of mountains. Seismographs register it as constant tremors. Satellites capture it as invisible waves that bend auroras into spirals across the night sky. To the untrained ear, it is music without melody. But to those chosen in dreams, it is language. And those dreamers have become the new guides of humanity. They gather in circles, chanting in tones that seem to rise from the ocean itself. Their voices weave with the hum, not overpowering, but harmonizing. When they chant, rivers change course, storms unravel, and barren fields awaken with sudden growth. Farmers who once relied on machines now plant in the rhythm of chants, and harvests bloom in abundance not seen for centuries. Across deserts, water flows where none should exist, summoned by those whose voices align with the vanished world's resonance. But harmony comes at a cost. Not all dreamers remain human. Some dissolve into the sea, their bodies unraveling into light that spirals downward into the waves. Others transform slowly, their eyes glowing with aurora-colored irises, their skin etched with faint spirals like the towers themselves. Governments have tried to contain them, fearing infiltration, fearing extinction. Yet containment fails. The resonance flows through borders as easily as the tide. And so, a new world order forms, not of politics, but of proximity to the hum. Communities closest to the glowing coasts thrive in abundance, their crops lush, their children strong, their dreams filled with visions of peace. Inland cities, distant from the resonance, wither. Machines corrode, networks collapse, and the old technologies fade like relics of another age. The hum does not destroy, but it demands alignment. Those who resist it, who fight against its rhythm, fall into silence. Not death, but a hollow stillness, as if something inside them has been switched off. The resonance age is neither utopia nor apocalypse. It is both and neither. It is a reminder that the world was never ours alone. Yet even now, deeper questions rise. If the vanished world has returned, what of the stars? For telescopes now record anomalies beyond Earth, spirals appearing not only in seas and skies, but etched faintly into the constellations themselves. It is as though the hum reverberates outward, across the void, stitching Earth's resonance into a fabric far larger than itself. What answers lie beyond the horizon? What waits among the stars that now bear the same marks as the towers of the sea? The world waits, once again, in awe and fear. And the hum continues. The seas are no longer borders. They are bridges. Fleets once armed with weapons now drift without sails or engines, carried by currents that move with eerie precision. No storms threaten them, no tides overturn them. The waters themselves have become pathways, as if guided by an unseen hand. Those who surrender their navigation to the hum find themselves delivered to coasts they never intended, yet always needed to reach. Settlers speak of being drawn not by maps, but by resonance, as though the sea knows where its children must belong. Whole communities rise along the shores, luminous under the auroras that no longer limit themselves to polar skies. Spirals of light now appear over equators, deserts, jungles, and mountains, bathing the earth in shifting colors each night. What was once spectacle is now constant, and though awe still clings to every gaze, humanity has begun to adapt. Children born beneath aurora skies bear faint markings on their skin, spirals no wider than a coin, glowing faintly when the hum deepens. Doctors call it anomaly. The dreamers call it inheritance. But not all inheritance is gentle. For where the resonance thrives, shadows also stir. Explorers who dared too far into the spiral-lit waters tell of shapes that rise from the depths. Not towers, but beings. Immense, fluid, shifting forms that blur the line between creature and current. They do not attack. They do not speak. They only watch, drifting near ships with eyes like molten silver before dissolving back into the waves. Yet each encounter leaves the crew altered. Some return in silence, their voices gone as though stolen. Others come back with visions too immense to describe, speaking of galaxies folded into seas, of civilizations that breathed water and light long before land was born. Governments falter under the weight of these testimonies. No army can march against water. No missile can strike a tide. Nations once built on strength and dominance find themselves irrelevant. Their borders dissolved by waves that obey resonance, not law. What remains is a fragile balance. Human stubbornness clinging to remnants of the old world, while the new world rises in spirals all around it. And yet, even within this balance, human ambition persists. Secret laboratories attempt to decode the hum, isolating frequencies, bending them into weapons. Engineers build machines meant to harness resonance, turning it into power grids, engines, and communication systems. But their successes are short-lived. The machines corrode within days, their circuits overwhelmed not by malfunction, but by rejection. It is as though the resonance cannot be contained, only joined. Technology that resists it fails. Only those who align with it thrive. This truth breeds division. Communities attuned to the resonance grow strong. Their leaders often dreamers, whose visions guide them to fertile land and abundant seas. But those who reject it, who fear it, who cling to the silence of the old world, see only decline. They watch their machines rust, their crops wither, their children born weaker with each passing season. Desperation festers. Murmurs of rebellion spread. Whispers of cleansing, of severing resonance entirely, move through the inland cities like poison. But how do you fight the sea? How do you silence a hum that flows through every stone, every tree, every bone? And so the inlanders turn to their own prophets. Not dreamers, but visionaries of resistance. They build shrines to silence, chambers shielded in lead and stone where the hum cannot penetrate. There, they chant in defiance, raising their voices not to harmonize, but to drown it out. Their chants do not alter rivers or calm storms. Instead, they fracture. Earthquakes ripple outward from their gatherings. Skies darken with storms. The resonance stutters for moments at a time, like a song breaking into static. The chosen dreamers warn of imbalance. They speak of the resonance as a living breath, one that cannot be silenced without consequence. Yet the inlanders persist, convinced that to surrender is to die, that the sea's hum is not inheritance but invasion. And with every chant of resistance, the earth shudders. In this fragile divide, humanity finds itself once more at the edge of decision. One path promises harmony, surrender to the hum, to the resonance, to the vanished world's return. The other path promises defiance, clinging to the silence of the old world, fighting to remain unchanged even as the earth itself transforms. But the hum does not wait for decisions. It grows louder, and in its depths, shadows stir that are neither tower nor current, but something else, something rising. The hum is no longer a background rhythm. It is a heartbeat that pulses through every moment, every silence, every dream. No place on earth is untouched. Even deep in deserts where oceans are only a memory, the sands vibrate at night with a low tremor, as the waves roll beneath them unseen. In mountain caverns, stones resonate like hollow drums, each echo aligned with the rhythm of the sea. Humanity no longer asks whether the resonance is real. They ask only how to live within it, or how to silence it forever. The chosen dreamers speak of harmony, of surrender, of joining the song. They describe visions of unity that stretch beyond Earth, of spirals that connect not just seas and skies, but entire constellations. To them, the resonance is not an invasion, but a revelation, the unveiling of a truth buried for millennia. They call themselves listeners, and wherever they gather, abundance follows. Fields bloom, storms calm, and sickness fades. Their voices do not command the world, they remind it. They align with what already exists. But the inlanders, those who resist, call themselves silencers. To them, the hum is a parasite, a colonization of the human spirit by something alien and merciless. They see the dreamers not as chosen, but as corrupted. Their children bear no spiral marks. Their skies hold no auroras. Their rivers remain dry. But their voices rise in defiance nonetheless, chanting not to join the resonance, but to fracture it. Their gatherings leave scars upon the earth. Canyons split, forests burn, storms rage unchecked. Where the listeners heal, the silencers shatter. It is a war not of armies, but of voices. At first, the resonance seemed indifferent to this conflict. The hum did not falter when dreamers sang, nor when silencers screamed. But now, the balance has shifted. Each act of harmony or fracture ripples outward, altering not just landscapes but the very skies above. Auroras twist erratically, pulsing in jagged lines that splinter into unnatural shapes. The stars themselves appear to shift, constellations bending as though tugged by unseen hands. Astronomers report spirals forming in distant galaxies, spinning faster with each chant, as if the resonance has been carried across the void itself. And then, something new emerges. The waters begin to move against themselves. Currents clash where they once flowed smoothly. Waves rise not in warning but in violence, colliding with one another in storms unseen since the Ice Age. Creatures of the deep, once calm, once silent, now breach the surface in chaos, their forms twisting like shadows torn apart. Fishermen speak of seas boiling with movement, of shapes that writhe and splinter into foam, of eyes in the water, not silver, but black. The listeners whisper that the silencers have gone too far, that their defiance has split the resonance, breaking it into discord. But the silencers claim victory, pointing to the chaos as proof that the hum is vulnerable, that it can be broken. Between these voices, the earth quakes. Yet beneath the chaos, a deeper revelation grows. For in the heart of the polar city, the spirals of the towers change. Once constant, steady, unbroken, they now pulse in uneven rhythms, as though echoing the fractures of the human world. Their glow dims and brightens erratically, casting long shadows across the waves. The hum itself wavers, skipping beats like a faltering heart. And in that silence, however brief, a new sound emerges. A whisper. Not harmony, not defiance, but something else. Something older than both. A language not heard in centuries, perhaps millennia. It carries no melody, no rhythm, no warmth. It is cold, sharp, invasive. The dreamers tremble when they hear it in their sleep, their visions filled with spirals collapsing inward, consuming themselves in endless descent. The silencers rejoice, believing they have forced the resonance to reveal its true, monstrous face. But the listeners warn otherwise. They insist this is not the voice of the sea, not the hum of the vanished world. It is something buried deeper, something the resonance had kept silent until now, something rising. And so humanity stands at the edge of a choice it does not understand. Join the resonance, despite its fractures, and risk dissolving into something beyond human. Resist it, and unleash the whisper that feeds on silence and chaos alike. Either way, the age of silence is gone. The resonance age has only just begun. The whisper spreads like a shadow across the world. It is subtle at first, a faint ripple in the hum, an echo in dreams, a shift in the tides that goes unnoticed by most. But those attuned, the listeners and the silencers alike, feel instantly. It moves through water and stone, through air and blood, threading its way into hearts and minds. Where the hum had been a heartbeat, the whisper is a pulse of a different kind, jagged, invasive, insistent. It is not calling for harmony, nor for defiance. It is calling for attention. The listeners respond by gathering closer, forming councils along the glowing coasts, chanting in synchronized spirals to stabilize the resonance. Their voices intertwine with the hum, creating patterns meant to soothe the fractures. Crops flourish again, rivers run clear, aurora skies regain their fluid grace. But even as they work, the whisper penetrates deeper, twisting visions in subtle ways. Dreamers awaken screaming of spirals collapsing into voids, of towers twisting and folding, of oceans boiling under unseen suns. The silencers, emboldened, act with increasing aggression. They construct engines meant to disrupt the hum, machines that pulse in counter-rhythm, firing waves of vibration into rivers, caverns, and seas. The results are immediate. The auroras shudder and streak violently across the night, Waves clash with one another, and portions of coastlines erode as if the planet itself rebels. But these acts come at a cost. The whisper seems to feed on resistance, gaining clarity and strength. In its presence, the silencers falter, hallucinate, or vanish altogether. Those who remain speak of shadows moving along walls, of waves shifting against them, of voices whispering truths their minds cannot bear. And in the polar city, the towers pulse differently. Once steadfast, now they shiver and rotate subtly, their spirals no longer synchronized. Light spills erratically across the waters, reflecting in fractured beams that carve strange shapes on the waves. Those who approach the towers describe feeling immense pressure in their chests, as if the air itself is alive and weighing them down. Some are pulled toward the water, unable to resist the gravitational pull of the resonance and the whisper combined. Others recoil, falling to their knees, staring at the spirals with a mixture of awe and terror. Then comes the vision. A child of the listeners, no more than 7 years old, stands on the edge of a cliff, gazing at the polar city from afar. Their eyes glow faintly, spirals etched across their arms. The child speaks words no adult understands, a language older than any human tongue, repeating phrases that pulse with the resonance itself. The sea responds. The auroras flare, waves rise in perfect synchronization, and the whisper bends toward them, shifting into something almost recognizable. A tone, a hum within the hum, a signal that carries meaning. The child steps forward. From that moment, a fragile new equilibrium forms. The hum, the whisper, the towers, the seas, all begin to interact in ways previously unseen. Human voices, when aligned, no longer simply chant. They shape the environment. They influence currents, weather, and even life itself. Flowers bloom where they speak, tides rise where they intend, and the auroras bend to mirror their gestures. It is no longer a battle between listeners and silencers, but a dance, dangerous, unpredictable, yet full of possibility. Yet the cost remains high. Those who cannot align with the resonance are left behind. Cities far from the polar coasts decay, rivers dry. Animals wander aimlessly. A quiet despair settles over vast regions where neither hum nor whisper is felt. Survivors speak in hushed tones of a new caste of humanity, those who are attuned and those who are abandoned. Even among the attuned, transformation is inevitable. Skin etched with spirals, eyes glowing faintly in aurora light, minds able to receive and transmit the resonance. They are no longer fully human, and yet not fully something else. Above all, the whisper looms, a reminder of limits yet unexplored. It is patient. It does not act directly, but waits, studying, probing, and responding. Those who hear it feel as if the planet itself is conscious, aware of every heartbeat, every thought, every defiance. And when it moves, no one can predict whether it will nurture or destroy. The resonance age deepens. Humanity is no longer the master of its fate. The planet, the sea, the vanished world, the hum, and the whisper all merge into a single living system. To survive, to thrive, to remember, one must move in rhythm with it, attuned to forces far greater than comprehension. Those who resist face isolation. Those who surrender risk losing themselves entirely. Yet even in this uncertainty, hope flickers. The child from the cliffs has shown that alignment is possible, that even amidst fracture, the resonance can be guided. Communities of listeners grow stronger, sharing knowledge, teaching others to hear, to feel, to move with the hum. The silencers, diminished but not destroyed, serve as a reminder that defiance shapes outcomes, for better or worse. And the world, transformed, vibrant, and terrifying, continues onward, a living testament to the vanished world's return. The resonance age has become not an era of dominance, but of balance. A precarious, beautiful, horrifying balance that humanity must learn to inhabit. The hum continues. The whisper waits, and the spiraled seas stretch endlessly toward horizons yet unseen.